Okay, good morning. Thank you all for coming over here. My name is Sushil Acharya. I'm the Director of Research and Grants, and this is our second Research and Grants Expo at RMU. Thank you all for being here this morning. Provost Jameson, distinguished guests from Carnegie Mellon University, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, the University of Pittsburgh, and esteemed faculty, colleagues, and staff. On behalf of RMU, and more specifically the Research and Grants Administration, thank you for participating in RMU's second Research and Grants Expo. I'm hopeful that through the various activities planned for today, participants will be able to hear from our panelists, view research work carried out by our faculty colleagues, and listen to the keynote address on life-changing innovations. This morning, our program begins with welcome remarks from Provost Jameson, followed by a panel discussion at 8:45. This year's topic is Predatory Journals, the Good and the Bad. At 10:15, we will start our poster exhibition where 33 RMU researchers will showcase their work. This will be followed by lunch and keynote address at 12. Before I end my opening remarks, I would like to acknowledge the support of my Research and Grants Awareness Advisory Council members, Lisa Norman from my office, and our student volunteers. At this time, I would like to request Provost Jameson to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecile. A year or so ago, Robert Morris University learned that it has been reclassified by U.S. News and World Report as a doctoral granting institution. And while we're not an R1, as some of our colleagues are, we're proud to have that R as part of Robert Morris's mission, that we are an institution that respects and values, rewards, and more importantly for the faculty, supports research. And this second conference, I think, underlines how much of a commitment we're making. I appreciate Sushil and his staff and what we've put together in terms of a program today. I think it'll be rewarding and useful for you. As you came in, you saw a publication that showcases some of the activity going on in research. Robert Morris has really begun to take its place, I think. We value all the types of research. We value the research of inquiry, of synthesis, and the research of application. And Robert Morris faculty are engaged in those. As I walk through the exhibit hall, and there will be more posters up soon, you'll be able to see all of those types of research reflected. So I want to express my thanks to my RMU colleagues for taking the time to exhibit your work here today, to showcase what you're doing, and to share ideas. I know that from last time when we did this project, faculty got to talking with one another, and new research ideas and new directions came out of this. So I really am grateful for Sushil again, organizing, and for you for participating. There are over 33 presenters, and I'm pleased to say all 5 of our academic schools are represented. 10 of these presentations that you see out there were driven by grants. And our office exists to support you in grant seeking and grant awards. And I just Friday got a note from Professor Acharya that another grant application had gone in, and he keeps me regularly updated on the grant activity on the campus. Really proud to help you and proud to support you in your research. The panelists, the distinguished researchers you'll hear this morning from CMU, IUP, Pitt, and RMU will be discussing an important topic. You know, I've been in this business a long time, and when I was a young professor and making my publication record, it was taken for granted that if you got a publication in a journal, that was a good thing. Over the years, as we've learned, there are journals and there are journals. And one of the topics we will talk about this morning is sort of the traditional academic journals that we're all used to, the way some of those have evolved, perhaps even the role of online journals, but this issue that has cropped up more recently of predatory journals. And we have an extraordinary panel, and I know they'll be introduced to you to discuss that. And Anthony Moretti will introduce them, and I think will take the lead in organizing the panel. Our the Chief Innovation Officer at UPMC, Rasu Shrestha, is speaking at our luncheon. He is going to is our keynote speaker later on this morning. I'm extraordinarily excited to have someone from UPMC, which is our partner in many ways at Robert Morris, and more in the research realm. You'll see that one of the cutting edges of research at Robert Morris is, in fact, research on healthcare and research on issues that deal with the wellness of the American population. This is an exceptional event, and I want to thank again the group who organized it. I want to thank all of you for being here, for organizing a venue that allows a dialogue and a conversation about research. We're ready for that at Robert Morris University. We thank our colleagues from Pitt, CMU, and IUP for being here to join us in that dialogue. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, Provost Jameson. An important task of the Research and Grants Administration is to publicize research and grant achievements. This year, we published the first issue of our research magazine, Achieve, where we feature 21 RMU faculty researchers. Feel free to pick up a copy from the front desk after the program. Another important task of my office is to help facilitate research, as research relies on literature reviews, which in turn relies on published research. A discussion on the issue of predatory journals is very timely. To the benefit of our researchers, our panel discussion today is on predatory journals. At this time, I would like to welcome our panelists. As I introduce the panelists one by one, I would like to request the panelists to take your seat on the stage. I would like to request the audience to hold their applause until the last panelist has been seated. Our first panelist, David Scherer. David Scherer is the Scholarly Communications and Research Curation Consultant with the University Libraries at Carnegie Mellon University. Alongside his library faculty colleagues, David identifies researches and provides sustainable, programmatic scholarly communication and research curation services and tools to support the evolving scholarly record. His research experience focuses on the ever-growing ecosystem of scholarly communications, initiatives, and integrations, supporting the development of the scholarly record throughout the research life cycle. David is also the co-editor of Making Institutional Repositories Work, a 2015 Charleston Insights in Library, Archival, and Information Sciences book series title. He is also a managing editor with the Directory of Open Access Journals, where he oversees a team of North American-based associate editors who review applications of journals for inclusion in the Directory of Open Access Journals. Recently, David has overseen the implementation of CMU's forthcoming comprehensive institutional repository, GuildHub, which is powered by the Figshare for Institutions platform. David, can you take a seat? Our second panelist is from IUP. Luis Gonzalez has been the Dean of Libraries at Indiana University of Pennsylvania since August 2010. Originally from Puerto Rico, he started his career working in academic libraries in 1986 as a circulation clerk. Soon after, he was promoted to circulation manager. Once he completed his MLS in 1997 from CNY's Queens College, he serves as the Access Services Librarian at SUNY Downstate Health Sciences Library. From 1999 to 2000, he served as Education and Reference Librarian at Mount Sinai School of Medicine, and also as the Clinical Librarian from the Pediatrics and Geriatrics Department of Mount Sinai Hospital. From 2000 to 2005, he served as the Associate Director for the NYU College of Dentistry Library, where he also taught information literacy and evidence-based practice. From 2005 and 2010, he was the Deputy Chief Librarian at CUNY's Hunter College Libraries. In addition to MLS, Lewis also has a master's in public administration. At SUNY Downtown, NYU Hunter College, and at its present position, he has intimately been involved with open access and copyright compliance. Lewis, can you please take your seat? Our third panelist from the University of Pittsburgh, Lauren B. Collister, is the Scholarly Communications Librarian for the University of Pittsburgh. She received her PhD in sociolinguistics in 2013, and in the process of doing so, realized there was more to academic work than doing research and publishing it. She became an advocate for open scholarship as an early career researcher and turned the focus of her career to helping her fellow scholars navigate the life cycle of scholarly work. At Pitt, Lauren engages directly with faculty, staff, and students on the subjects of copyright, access, and open scholarship. She also advocates for author rights, copyright reform, and increased transparency in the research process. She serves as a voice for scholarly communication with the Linguistic Society of America, the OpenCon community of early career researchers, and the Association of College and Research Libraries. She's an active linguistics scholar and writes on the topics of language change and digital communication, publishing all of her new work in open access journals. Lauren, can you please take your seat? Finally, our final panelist here is Bruce Johnston. Bruce A. Johnston, MLS, is the Associate Director at the Robert Morris University Library. He is actively involved in the department and provision of library services, information, and instruction to students and faculty, primarily in the nursing, nuclear medicine, and health administration areas. He serves as co-chairperson of the university's Institutional Review Board. A 1979 graduate of University of Pittsburgh School of Library and Information Sciences, he has held several library positions at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center in the Department of, okay, this is going to be difficult for me, but anyway, otolaryngology, okay, excuse me, okay, and ophthalmology from 1979 to the present. He has authored several peer-reviewed articles and has received 3 grants, including a 2012 National Institutes of Health Technology Improvement Grant that studied the evolving role of iPads in undergraduate nursing education, as well as an earlier interagency grant in 1995 to study use of mobile laptops in HIV/AIDS information dissemination to homebound patients. Bruce, can you please take your seat? Okay. Our moderator today is Anthony Moretti. Dr. Anthony Moretti is the director of RMU's Center for Innovation Teaching and Directed Engaged Learning. He also is an associate professor in the Department of Communications. He is the co-editor of the peer-reviewed academic journal, Electronic News, which examines issues pertaining to the broadcast news industry and content, uses of technology, staffing of newsrooms, and more. Dr. Moretti has been part of the RMU family since 2012. He previously taught at Point Park University and Texas Tech University. He earned his PhD from the E.W. Scripps School of Journalism at Ohio University. Anthony, at this point, I will turn over the stage to Anthony, and he will lead our discussion here, moderate our discussion on predatory journals. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and it's good to see so many familiar faces from the RMU family here. This morning is designed to be as conversational as can possibly be. And I promise we're going to leave time at the end for questions. I also know that thanks to Adam Sullivan, there is a YouTube link that is active. So if anyone is watching us online anywhere around the world, please feel free to use the chat feature, get a question to Adam. He will pass it on to me, and I will be sure that our panelists are asked the question. A favor to our panelists, there are 2 microphones in front of you. If you can use one of those whenever a question is directed to you so that our friends who are operating the video signal and the audio signal can be sure to hear you as clearly as we possibly can. So let me begin with a question that is directed to all 4 of you, and I'll just start on this side here with David and just work our way down. And I want to pick up on something that the provost mentioned in his opening remarks. We used to take for granted the idea that a journal was legitimate, for lack of a better phrase. We used to take for granted that the idea that if you published in the journal of X, that there was no question about its credibility or whether or not it had that dreaded term predatory associated with it. What happened? When did it happen? And what were the factors that led us to suddenly have to question the integrity of a journal based simply on a predatory status? And David, I'll start with you, and then, as I said, work our way down the table. See if that's on or not.
I apologize. I have a small child, so everything's just floating around.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
I think we can really see that it's been in the past 7 or 8 years that we've seen just a deluge of academic publishing locations and subject areas. We've also seen an expansion of interdisciplinary-based research. So I think many of us are seeing this expansion of the literature, and we have to look at that and see, are we fully covering all the different subject areas and matters that are being covered by what we would call the legitimate venues? And I think it's when we start seeing different groups preying upon early researchers and graduate students, and the expectations that these individuals would be publishing much sooner now than maybe in previous opportunities. And looking at this as a way to kind of prey upon those groups that are not as well informed or are just getting their bases in their disciplines and in their subject areas and trying to find opportunities. I think it also has to say something too about those traditional areas that are not necessarily trying to push away those that are trying to get early entry, but trying to find an opportunity that makes it more inclusive for all individuals, but making it inclusive in an informed manner. I do appreciate too that this is not a panel that's talking about open access as a predatory model, that this is not predatory open access journals, but predatory journals. I think there's been a lot of misconceptions that to be open access is of a lesser value, or there's more potential to find predatory journals in open access venues. I think we're seeing even today that that's actually becoming more balanced in what we're seeing, that not all journals that would be quote unquote predatory are necessarily open access. And when you start looking at the different features that they have and the requirements, especially their copyright statuses, you'll see that these are not truly open access journals in some cases. I think it's something, though, that working with researchers, both those that are new to the disciplines, that are new to the academy, those that are more entrenched, as well as information professionals such as members of the libraries, and with us working together to kind of evaluate this, because it's an ongoing process. In a lot of ways also, I think that as you see new editors and new journals popping up, a lot of it also is misinformation for them to get their journals created, to know what are the best practices for journals and where can they find that information, so that as a new journal comes up, being able to make that evaluation about its requirements, its capabilities, and just because it's new doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be predatory, but having all these different groups at a table where they can have these conversations. So thank you very much.
You bet. Luke, I saw you nodding your head a couple of times, so I know there's something, or more than a couple of some things you're interested in weighing in on as well.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. One of the things that have created this problem that if we want to call it like that, which I do, is the fact of this publish or perish attitude. So when open access started in the, I guess it was in the mid-1990s, and credible and reputable organizations started creating the open access model, a lot of wishy-washy publishers moved in and tried to take advantage of the urgency, the desire of researchers to have their research out into open access. So it is a combination of to me it's a combination of the of predatory practices in order to gain some financial advantage of people that are forced by the publish or perish paradigm that we have with people that are on tenure, people that get evaluated, I'm going to say tenure track, and also people that get, even though, like in my institution, even though after you get tenure, you get a review every 5 years. So it's been, like everything, it's an aggressive way of trying to trick people that want to publish into going with this, like I call, for lack of a better term, wishy-washy or doubtful, of poor reputation or of no reputation publishers, in order, and basically what they're trying to do is to get the money of the authors. And I think that goes. I think I was at where I was Mount Sinai in NYU. The biology of science blogs came out, and there was this, and this is a reputable site, and you had the opportunity to publish there. Now, and this was open access. Now, in order to maintain their model, they were asking authors to provide a fee to maintain the infrastructure of the organization. And I think that some people saw that and saw it as taking advantage of the situation and saying, okay, so let's start going out and fishing for people. We say, we will publish this for you. And but you have to send me. I remember that blogs. It was biology of science. It was about $1,000 per author, but NYU was able, since at that time we had 6,000 researchers, to reach an agreement with them. But people saw that as an opportunity to make a quick buck.
Thank you so much. I want to echo some of the things my previous panelists have said, but I want to add a couple of things. So the internet, we all use it. It's made possible a lot of great things in academic publishing and the sharing of research. We can now share huge data sets and videos and other material, great figures, interactive figures with our research that can make research better online for anybody to see, as long as it's open access, or otherwise they have to pay. You can get faster publication. Peer review doesn't have to rely on the mail, on somebody actually opening the letter or sending it back and finding time to go to the post office. It can also create new models for some things that people complain about in academic publishing, such as new models of peer review, new ways to share research and to build upon research that has come before you. But it has also enabled some of the bad things, like these predatory publishers, or as a couple of my colleagues said in a recent article, illegitimate publishing entities, which is a great phrase. And so these predatory publishers put a stain on those good efforts that are being done by scholars like us and like you all. using the tools and the technologies that we have available. And these predatory journals prey on real problems that face researchers. We've heard about publish or perish. We've heard about the pressure to publish in certain journals. We've heard about grants. I want to point out one more. Andy Nobis from INASP recently wrote an excellent article. It was about critical thinking in a post-blacklist world. And it covered a lot of these issues, but one that really resonated with me and with many of my colleagues was that these predatory publishers so often prey on not only early career scholars, graduate students, but also scholars from less privileged situations, such as those who aren't affiliated with major universities, those from the global south, those from countries that don't get as much research funding as, say, the United States. I tell you, I'm a native English speaker at a major university in the US, and sometimes it takes me a few minutes to look at a journal and say, this one looks a little bit dodgy. If it takes me a few minutes and I know the language very well and I'm very familiar with publishing, I can only imagine how difficult it would be for somebody in a less privileged position than I am to understand this. And these journals know that. They know that article processing fees are a part of the landscape. They know that scholars in the United States, at our institutions, as well as around the world, are facing these issues, and they prey on them to make a quick buck. Thank you.
Lauren, thank you. Bruce?
Well, going last year, most of my ideas have been stolen. No pun intended.
Plagiarism is a different panel, all right?
Is that in the room next door? No. I'll just follow up on some of the things that have already been mentioned. Certainly, the rapid development of the internet is integral to the situation that we're in today, which is a very, in my opinion, very dangerous situation for academic publishing in general. I've been involved in it since 1979, so when I first graduated library school and got my first job at UPMC, et cetera, we were strictly paper-based. There was no ands, if, or buts about it. There wasn't even computers back in the 1970s to do, from the library perspective, database searches, things of that nature. And I'm not going to go into the whole history, but looking what it is today versus what it was 30 years ago, it's a difference between night and day. And we now have, basically, as everybody's well aware, we get instant access. If we don't get a response back from our PC or our mobile device, in a second, we're upset. It's too slow. Back in earlier times, getting information could have been a 3 or 4 day process done largely by snail mail. We didn't have fax machines. We didn't have the internet, et cetera, et cetera. So I see this whole revolution in predatory publishing in maybe a little bit different perspective. But I will say, not that I'm sticking up for anything predatory, but vanity presses have been around for decades and decades and decades, where if you wanted to publish an article and or publish a book, you just paid for it. You went to a vanity press and they did it for you and released it. Back when I first started in otolaryngology, we had numerous vanity publications that sometimes just showed up on our doorstep in the library, and we had to decide what to do with them. In most cases, once I got to learn the journal landscapes, put it that way, those went in the trash. We didn't keep them. But you learn which are the good peer-reviewed journals and which may not be. I would also say in closing that not only the internet, but again, as been previously mentioned, the publish or perish, I'll call it mentality, has really accelerated in the past decade or so. Even to now, we have students, undergraduate students, writing peer-reviewed articles. So the age has gotten lower and lower and lower, and we do have a proliferation of authors who are desperate, and I will say desperate, to publish something. And in some cases, they really don't care where it gets published, just so they can run around with it and say, look, I published. So it's it's turned into a very complex situation. And I do think, from perhaps a library perspective, that the the current emphasis on predatory journals to get authors' money up front, and be that $200, $1,000, what have you, is a reaction from the declining number of print subscriptions and/or electronic subscriptions that the recent, maybe 5 to 10 year massive consolidation in journal publishing has resulted in. At this point, years ago, there was hundreds, if not thousands, of small publishers, not only university publishers, but small companies. They would publish a handful of journals, and that was their the end of their positions. Now we have, in the past maybe 5 to 10 years, a huge consolidation in terms of the number of publishers. If we look in the health sciences, for example, we're down to about 4. There's Elsevier, there's Wiley, there's Taylor and Francis, and there's Sage. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot of publishers left. And so they're losing, in order for them to regain what they're losing in the cancellation of print subscriptions, they are basically charging the publishers to have an article published. I know there's a lot more to come, but I'll stop there.
Thank you. If you can keep the microphone on that side of the table, because I want to address the next question to Lauren. You said in your opening remarks that as someone who is a native English speaker, you sometimes have to dive deep into the information about the journal. So if you could, give us sort of a broad overview. Are there some key words we should look for? Are there moments, or what are those moments that as you're looking at a journal, do you go, aha, that's a predatory journal, and here's how I know? What should we be looking for?
That's a great question. A lot of people have been talking about this. There used to be a resource called Beall's List that listed these sort of predatory journals due to, he arranged them by some criteria that not everybody agreed with. For example, if a journal was based in India, then it was automatically on the list. So even Beall's List needed to be taken with a grain of salt. That list has since been taken down for reasons we are not quite aware of. But a number of resources have popped up in the interim. So I mentioned an article that was written about critical thinking in a post-blacklist world and how to really evaluate a journal for what it's doing, what it's contributing to the field, and what its good qualities are. There's another article recently published in the Times Higher Ed called 13 Ways to Spot a Predatory Journal, which is a very good list. There's a provision on that list that I disagree with. It's about article processing fees, but we can get into that later. I know you have some questions about APCs. But one of my favorite resources is this resource called Think, Check, Submit. You can find it at thinkchecksubmit.org. I really like this because it's not just a list of journals that are good or bad, but it asks the reader about the very act of publication itself and how it aligns to standards in the field. He has it right here. Wonderful. Oh, you even have handouts to share. My goodness, he is prepared. So some of the things that this list talks about are thinking about, okay, who are the editors of this journal? Do I recognize the names? Can I look up their scholarship and the scholarship of the editors and see what kind of work it does? Can I look at past articles in this journal and evaluate it for myself? Say, oh, I know this author does good work. This is a great article, really, has been nicely put together. It reads well, it follows the logic, and it does good research. I also look for transparency in things like the peer review process. If it tells you exactly how it's going to be peer reviewed, okay, it's going to be submitted, it's going to go through one round of double-blind peer review from 3 reviewers, and then you're going to get the revisions, and we know how that goes. If it just says peer review, I am a little bit skeptical, because that can be one person going, yeah, all right, looks good, right? So that won't, I look for transparency in that. And I also look for, as I think David mentioned earlier, transparency in copyright. So I am always a little bit skeptical of journals that ask you to sign over your copyright, which is a pretty standard process in traditional journal publishing. I always want to know what I'm going to get in return for giving them my intellectual property. So are they going to share my journal article? Is it indexed in reputable scholarly indexes that I recognize and that I use in my own research? Is it being cited by scholars that I know and recognize? So I look for these kind of things. I look for a very clear copyright statement that says what I can do with my article after I publish it and what the journal is going to do with my article after I publish it. And that transparency, the knowledge about peer review, and actually evaluating the journal for myself is something that I do.
Bruce, David, or Lewis, anything else to add about the idea of sort of trigger signs for a predatory journal?
Yeah. Mr. Beale's list of journals started, about 4 or 5 years ago. He did publish it annually. He is a librarian. He doesn't want to go by Dr. Beale. He's Mr. Beale. He makes a point of saying that if you do talk with him. But his work was kind of an initial pass-through of trying to identify some of these journals that are questionable. He did a very good job. He did update it. For some reason, back in January 2017, it suddenly disappeared from the internet. There are some rumors out there that it was running into some legal problems because he was based at University of Colorado, and I think there was some lawsuits concerning his list that began to pop up. It is coming back. Nature, the journal Nature, is trying to, for lack of a better word, resurrect this list again. There are other lists that are out there. Mr. Peel did have some issues with his maybe methodology and things like that. So there are ways to find it. Speaking, we did talk a little bit about the Think, Check, Submit process, which I just found like 11 o'clock last night. And it is a good way. It's a very easy website to go to. It gives a lot of information about what you need to do thinking-wise, just kind of in your head about is the journal that you want to submit to, is it in your correct field, et cetera, et cetera. And then the checking part is probably the most laborious part of it, is really doing some digging, as one of the speakers alluded to earlier. Back in the olden days, so to speak, we kind of took it for granted. Very rarely was I in the library asked to verify the veracity of a particular journal. It was not that it was assumed that it was a great journal, but there was more an assumption of honesty before the predatory journal situation began to arise. The Think, Check, Submit, we're seeing more and more that the predatory journal issue is becoming much more public. We're seeing now, at least in my specialties of otolaryngology, head and neck surgery, et cetera, that there are articles coming out addressing predatory journal publishing and what to do, how to identify it. And I'm also seeing it in a lot of other healthcare radiology journals. Nursing journals got on the bandwagon before a lot of other specialties did. And they've written, again, peer-reviewed in legitimate journals, articles that address the predatory journal issue and provide a lot of tips, things of that nature for potential authors to look at before they make that jump into the submission phase.
David, I saw your hand go up. I want to make sure you get to weigh in as well.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to some of the points that Lauren was making as far as, what has the internet done for us negatively versus now what has it done for us positively, being able to do these types of searches, because we know, as it was previously stated, in the past when a journal came to you and it was in the mail and it was printed, there wasn't a lot of thinking about, well, is this a legitimate journal or not? It was more thinking about, well, do I agree, or is the scholarship legitimate that I'm looking at? But with many journals today now are purely online, they're purely digital, that both allows us to see an increase in access, but also more questioning about whether or not this is something that is legitimate or not. And I think with the power of the internet, there's a lot of things that we can look at now to validate the journals, and there's a lot of different venues to do so. Think, Check, Submit is one place for the author to kind of do a self-assessment, but also there are a lot of organizations. So as Dr. Attari mentioned, I'm a managing editor of the Directory of Open Access Journals. where I oversee a team of associate editors that review content on a journal's page for information about is it a truly open access and valid journal to be thinking about. So how the DOAJ differs from what was going on with Beall's list. Beall's list was more of a black list. You know, you didn't want to be on Beall's list if you were a journal. How that differs from the DOAJ is what we call a white list. So it means that journals have to go through a very rigorous qualification process. There's actually 55 different points that we review about a journal to ensure that it is a valid and acceptable academic journal. So for those journals that you find in the directory, those are journals that we have gone through a process where at least 3 individuals have looked at it, and these are information professionals like librarians, these are disciplinary faculty as well, those that know their disciplines very, very well and know who to spot for editors and members of the peer review process and editorial boards. But also there's even this higher level within the DOAJ of journals that have received what we call the seal of the DOAJ. So these are journals that all of the information is transparent, the copyright status is transparent, all of the articles can be indexed and searched. So it's it's an enhanced, rigorous process. But what I'll add finally is with the power of the internet, we have new tools that surround publishing and academic scholarship, like alternative metrics or alt metrics. So things that we can look at to validate the scholarship individually about a journal to find out, is this journal as a cohesive unit a valid publishing venue or not?
Louis, let me start the next question and direct it at you, and then the other panelists can weigh in as well. If a journal asks me to write a check in order to publish, does that mean it is automatically a predatory journal?
No. It depends on what they're asking you. If they're asking you for I have it here, for a publication fee, they probably are. If they're asking you for processing, wait a second, I have it here. Article processing charge. That is not the same.
How do I tell the difference? Is it just simply those words?
Yeah, they have.
It is simply those
they
words.
have to
Okay.
tell you.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to publish your journal, and the other thing that you have to think about is when they said, okay, so if you were to BLOS, I'm going to use the BLOS example again. If you go to if you were to BLOS, they say yes, you have to put $1,000. But you have to see which is the what is the process that they are offering in order to publish your journal. It can't be like, we'll send us $250, $1,000, and your journal will be published in 3 weeks. We have an editorial board. Always go and check who is in the editorial board. Check for the check for the CVs of the people in the editorial board. Usually, if it is a reputable journal, the people in the editorial boards have published previously, have published in well-known journals, are well-known in their fields of expertise, and they are. No. The short answer is not necessarily. It's just how they phrase what they want for the fee that they are requiring from you. You have to, like my colleagues have said, you have to do a little research. You have to go and look at editorial boards. You have to go and look at the editor. You have to look at the time that if it's a double-blinded peer review, if it's or if it's an expedite process, that usually it is like not kosher. They will come and tell you, yeah, we'll have it, or send us the I was reading send us your article, and and said it's an expedite review, peer review, and then 3 weeks later they say yes, it passed, or 2 weeks later, and you have to send $1,000 in order for us to put it on our open access website. Look at their open access. At their websites, look for information that corroborates that they are who they say they are. Sometimes, and this goes even further, is that they name people in their editorial boards that they have, that the members, the people that they're naming, they don't even know that they are on that editorial board.
Mm-hmm.
So they might say that I am in the Journal of librarianship, and I said, no, I'm not in that journal. So you have to do in-depth research once your contact. And the other thing, which is very, and I was victim of one of those, I'll tell you, is when they call you to solicit. Usually it's not like that. Usually, and they didn't ask me for money at first, but I did, and I went and I looked at the place and at the publisher, and I said, this doesn't look like something that I want to get published on. So always do your research to make sure that yes, they might be legitimate, and yes, like the sample the example that I brought up, it is a legitimate site, but they might not be.
Lauren or David or Bruce, anything to add to the question of how publication fees versus article processing fees make a difference?
This is a great question. I want to pick up on a couple of things that you just said. So first of all, you use the example of the Public Library of Science, or PLOS, which is one of my favorite examples to talk about. They charge a very high article processing fee, but they give it back because they are open access. Anybody can read them. The author retains their copyright, so they can keep reusing that journal material, something for which you may have to have gotten permission from the publisher to reuse your own stuff previously. And they also have these metrics, fantastic metrics, as David mentioned, for tracking the usage of your article and the impact, both scholarly and sort of attention that you're getting from the news or social media. And they have these wonderful displays of figures and data that readers and authors can investigate and drill down into. It's really quite a nice platform. It really takes advantage of a lot of technology's possibilities, which I really appreciate. And they don't charge subscription fees to libraries or individuals or organizations. Instead, to bring all this to you, they use this article processing charge, which as a librarian and a scholar, I'd rather have my money going to providing this really great interface and making it free for anybody to read than to some process that I can't quite see through, right? Because I think that these article processing charges, in some cases, not all cases, as you mentioned, there are some bad ones, but I think that when they're done well and when they're done right, they're more transparent than some so-called traditional journals that have subscription fees. So please bear with me while I tell you something you already know, but as an author, you submit an article to a traditional journal, receive peer review, edit, and then send it through copy editing and formatting for publication. You are paid to do this, usually by your university if you work for one, as part of your job, but you're not paid for that by the journal. Then that journal requires you to sign a copyright transfer agreement, giving away your intellectual property for no compensation to the journal, and then the journal turns around and sells your intellectual property back to you in the form of a subscription fee. And usually it's a library paying this, or an organization. And as I'm sure my colleagues on the panel and your librarian colleagues here at RMU could tell you, often we're prevented from disclosing the actual price that we pay to get your intellectual property back. So I think that because the university is paying twice for research put in some of these traditional journals. They're paying you, the scholar, once for doing your great work in your writing, and then they're paying the publisher who received your intellectual property for free from you for the privilege of publishing in their journal. The university is paying twice for this, and what's the value that they get out of it compared to a open platform like PLOS with all these great metrics and these great displays, and that's freely available for anybody to read and for the author to reuse. So I think we have to think about that, what a journal is contributing to the field and to the readers and to the authors, and what our money is actually paying for, and whether we know how much that money is, where it's going, and how it's being used.
David or Bruce, either one?
Just to follow up on a few things that Lauren talked about, and also Lewis. You talked a little bit about phantom editors, the editors that become the editors who don't know it. I've heard numerous cases where once they find out that they're kind of an editor when they never signed on for it, they can't get it off. They can't get it off the list. They're the editor basically forever. And no matter what you do to try to get your name off that list, it doesn't work. Unfortunately, that happened to one of our physicians at UPMC. He inadvertently was, and a very well-known physician, got onto one of those lists, and now he can't get it off the list. He's still the editor of that journal 2 or 3 years later, much to his embarrassment, put it that way. Another thing, there is no way that a journal, to my knowledge, can really do an acceptable peer-reviewed process in 2 or 3 days. As you talked about a few minutes ago, it's a process, and it's not a one-time process. It can be an iterative process that goes back and forth 5, 6, 7 times before a reputable editorial board is happy with the actual manuscript. And in my experience over 35 years, I have never seen an article, and I dealt with probably thousands of articles written by our department over 30 years, that a journal article submitted comes back pluperfect with no mistakes, no questions from the editor. There are, I've had residents, they're first year, second year residents in our specialties come back almost in tears. Oh, they rejected my journal article, or they accepted it, but I have to make all these changes, and that's the way the dice rolls in publishing. There's, I've never seen a paper. Even I wrote a 3-page paper about a not even a medical topic, and it came back twice. You forgot to put a comma here, or your table or your chart or your graph was not understandable. And when you get, it's a fact of life, when you get an editorial board of maybe 8, 10, a dozen different experts in the field from basically all across the country or in an international journal, perhaps all around the world, they're not all going to agree the first time around that this paper is perfect. There is always something. I think they kind of like to send things back with a lot of red marks on it to see what you say. But I've had residents come to my office at UPMC in tears because their manuscript was rejected. But again, after a little hand-holding and a few grammatical changes and all that, it goes through. But there's all that. The role of databases, bibliographic databases, cannot be underestimated. The articles that are in ProQuest, articles that are in EBSCOhost, every article that pops out of PubMed, these are all from journals that have gone the extra step in terms of being evaluated by folks at EBSCO, the folks at ProQuest, and every article in PubMed is a peer-reviewed article. That's kind of a prerequisite for it being included. But I will add that we need to always keep in mind that these databases, particularly PubMed, because that's the one I'm most familiar with, it only includes in their database about 3,500 journal titles. In the field of healthcare medicine, out there worldwide, there are, the last time I checked, it's been a year or two, there are about 27,000 titles out there, which means that there are, if my math is correct, about 24,000 titles that don't make it into the database, for starters, and 2, don't have to go through the rigorous application process that the PubMed, the National Library of Medicine, and NIH go through, sitting down there in Washington, D.C., 8 hours a day, looking at these journals and deciding whether to include them in their database. And again, their database, while it grows exponentially over time, they only accept a handful every year of new journals. It may be 10 or 12, so they're not adding new titles constantly, by the hundreds or the thousands. They are adding, after they go through a huge amount of peer review before they even get put into PubMed. Lastly, I did bring half a listing. It runs 19 single-side pages, so the entire document is about 40 single-sided titles of journals that Mr. Beal has determined was a predatory journal. So that's thousands of titles. And not that I'm going to read them all off via mass walk, but if you go through this list, many of these titles look legitimate. There's an International Journal of, or the Canadian Journal. They sound like they are peer-reviewed, legitimate journals.
And that's part of the scam, obviously.
Yeah,
is to make them look legit.
I mean, there's a ton in here of international journals, or just all kind of journals that are. Let me just find one here and read it off to you real quick. I'm just looking for a real good one. Anyway, there's a ton of them out there that are International Journal of or World Views on. I mean, they all, many of them sound extremely, to the naked eye, very, very legitimate. And you need to take some of these titles and put them in Google and see if you can find the actual title. And also, last but not least, a lot of these titles are not single company journal titles. There's several companies out there, and they'll publish 100 titles, but they all sound pretty much, they all start out International Journal of, or Worldviews on, or whatever. So you have to really look at them. And when you do go and look at just a couple sample articles, I know my eyes basically popped out of their eyes when I saw a few full-text journals with, I didn't get by the first page or two, with massive typos, bad grammar. You could tell they were not, they had not gone through the peer review process. And one last thing. What scares me the most from the health sciences point of view is if these articles are not going through some kind of peer review, how simple is it to make a mistake? Let's say you're writing a pharmaceutical type article in a predatory journal that doesn't go through peer review, that nobody reads at the peer review level, and you're doing a pharmacological one, and you misplace a decimal point, and instead of the dosage being 0.1 milligrams, it says 1 milligram or 100 milligrams, and people, that journal goes out there, it's available, people read it, particularly maybe non-experts, and they don't question the dosage mistake. So you, in good faith, give a patient one milligram of something when it should have been 0.1 milligrams. That patient could have very bad outcomes. Sorry, I went on for so long.
That's okay. I haven't forgotten about the audience. We have questions for you coming up in a second or two after this last question from me. So start scribbling those questions down, and we have a mic that will be coming your way. Last question from me before we turn the floor over, and we'll start this side and work our way down. I have a well-researched, well-documented research article. I submit it. I realize, oh shoot, it's now in the hands of a predatory journal. I want to essentially now make sure that I submit it to a legitimate journal, but there is always that question, is this research being considered by other journals or other academic organizations? The ethical side of me says I have to admit that. The other side of me says, well, it's a predatory journal, so I'm not going to publish there anyway. How do I handle that as a scholar?
So I think it's a very tight balance to try to understand, especially you've submitted an article to a journal that either you've come to find out later on it is a predatory journal and you're trying to submit it to a more valid journal. And I think this is part of why this makes it harder today of having to make that decision of trying to determine an article being our journal being valid or not, because once you've submitted it, there's really not a lot that you can do. At the same time, we've mentioned about some of these journals putting the names of different members of the Academy on their editorial boards or as a co-editor or a member of the journal in some fashion without ever listing, talking to the individual. So when the individual sees it, they've had no idea that they've been affiliated with this journal for so long and what that can do about the reputation. I think the same thing can be said, though, for journals. When the articles are published, there are a lot of tools out there now that can generate an article with the click of a button, and inserting different buzzwords and disciplinary keywords into an article and sticking it in different places. I mean, there was an affront really to open access publishing back in 2013, where an author did this actually, and then submitted a journal article to about 300 various journals to see who would publish it. And I think that could be also true. I know I remember recently dealing with this with a faculty member where an article was published that they had never submitted because it was trying to validate articles in a journal by putting reputable names of individuals in early issues. When looking at this for others, I think it's one of those things where this is not an unknown practice today. So I think as an author, if you've submitted it to a journal and it's become known to be predatory, or you believe it's going to be predatory, go through the processes that you can. Ask to have it withdrawn. Say you wish to not have it submitted to this journal, especially if you've done so prior to paying anything. I want to point out one of the points that Louise was pointing out was there's different types of costs, and the problem today also is that all journals use different jargon to describe different activities. Some will call the final version of the article that you submitted to them the post-print or the author's accepted manuscript. So the same is true also for the processes. Some will call these submission fees or editorial fees versus what is more commonly known as article processing charges or publication charges. And it's the timing of these and where that information is brought to you and how transparent that information is actually. So if you're lucky enough to get prior to that point of paying anything, trying to get it withdrawn. And I think it also, when trying to resubmit to a more valid journal, we tell our early researchers, it's always a good idea to include a cover letter when you submit an article to a journal. I think being upfront and honest about that, so that they're aware, because any good editor is going to do a search of that article to ensure that has this been submitted anywhere else, and they may come across that if it's gone through that 2 to 3 week publication process. At the same time, though, because of these fees, many of these quote unquote predatory journals never publish the articles that are submitted. And the fees, Lauren was talking about some of the higher cost with some of the valid open access publishers and other traditional publishers that use article processing charges. But some of these submission fees, they're made to be kind of scrapers. They're not charging you lots of money. They're not charging thousands upon thousands. They're charging you, $100 US, $200 US, very early, small fees, because what they're trying to do is to get as many people to submit to it rather than trying to get that one major charge. So we have lots of times where authors have actually submitted to a journal and they've not heard back from the editors, no one's communicating with them, email addresses have been shut off, and a lot of it is just trying to get those small fish charges.
Louis, I'm a faculty member at IUP. Do now, what advice do you give me?
You're toast. Especially
thanks.
if you send the fee that they ask you for, you probably, if there was some small print or something in their website that you are going to be that they have the copyright rights to your article. The best thing, like David said, is do your homework ahead of time. Don't submit because of this practice that has developed in the last few years. I'll use myself as an example. when I was going to submit that publication, it was like probably, where was I? I was at Hunter. So that was like 12 years ago. Do your homework and look at the website. Look at for information about the publisher. Look for information about the journal before you submit anything, because usually there's going to be some small print that it's going to tie you to them, and either they can say, okay, so you can have the article back, but you're not going to get your 200 or 1,000 or between 200 and 1,000 back. So it's a matter of being alert now that there are lists and there is the open access journals list that lists all that, and that they do the research and they do the footwork for us. Look into those things before you do anything. I was just before we started, I was looking at a presentation that I have to do in a couple of weeks, and I was looking at it, and the website that I was looking at, it had all the things that we all four have been talking about: publishers, publishing board, resumes of the publishing board, the peer review process. It's explained to you. And again, like Lauren said, and Bruce said, don't accept a 2 or 3 day, 2 or 3 week period of peer review process, because that will not work. So if you were in IUP,
I'd be toast.
you'll be toast.
That's not nice. No, I'm kidding. Lauren or Bruce, just quickly so that we have time to let the audience ask questions as well. Am I toast?
Maybe. This actually happened to me at the University of Pittsburgh. An alumna, graduate student, and I always say I'll help anybody, even if you're graduated from Pitt. So it goes to all of you in the room too. I'll help you too. Maybe some of you on YouTube. So she came to me and she said, "Oh no, this journal is it." So I just submitted it and they published it already. It didn't even go through peer review. What happened? And I was like, "Oh no." So I went and I looked, and there it was. Hadn't gone through peer review. She hadn't paid anything. She hadn't even paid anything. She just submitted. And that was enough for this predatory journal to publish her article and then try to extort publication fees out of her. It was, again, a low amount. I think it was $150. But so I had to investigate. So I actually went and I pretended like I was going to submit something. I didn't actually submit anything. It was a blank Word document. If they publish that, it'll be great. And so I looked, and there's no contract. She didn't sign anything. She didn't actually agree to anything. So she still owns the copyright to her preprint. And this is an unauthorized use. So we tried to do first a DMCA takedown request. And this publisher was based in, I believe it was China. I can't quite remember where they were, but it was somewhere not the US. And so the DMCA takedown request had no effect. We probably could have done some sort of copyright lawsuit. She didn't want to go that way. She said it was too much work. She wasn't really that invested in it, but she was really wanting to get this article published and have it go through peer review. So what we did, as exactly what Dave said, we sent cover letters to a couple of very reputable journals in her field. We checked them out first. We used Think, Check, Submit, and she sent them with the cover letter, and these journals all said, "Oh, it's been published before, no." So that didn't work out for her. So what I would say, based on this experience, is that what she's wound up doing now is she's majorly revising the article, combining it with another one, because she still owns the copyright, so she can still use that material. And she's going to submit this whole new article whenever she gets it done. But editors out there, journal editors, journal managers out there, know that this is a thing that can happen. And some of these authors may genuinely want to make their paper better, to have it undergo peer review, to have your experts have a look at it. And by the time it undergoes peer review and gets changed and edited, and maybe several rounds of peer review, maybe something new comes up, that's going to be a radically different article from that draft that was published. So if you're an editor or have any influence on an editorial board, please consider this, because some of these predatory articles are really just drafts. They might really just be the equivalent of a preprint, which in some fields it is accepted and the general practice to post your preprints online ahead of publication. So you may be able to have a positive impact on that article and on this author and do something really good. So for any editors listening, keep that in mind, because there may be a really good outcome to have here.
Bruce, anything to add on the subject of whether or not I'm in trouble?
Oh, that's pretty nice. I know at UPMC in our department of otolaryngology, we do a library resource type orientation every year to our incoming residents and fellows. And we have started in the past about 2 years to almost pull away from teaching them how to use PubMed and all that kind of stuff, because it's kind of self-explanatory, to beginning to proactively address this issue of predatory publishing and to make the newbies, so to speak, aware of the traps that they can very easily fall into in their quest to publish journals or publish or perish, or to beat somebody else in getting their publication done. And so that's now the gist of our resident orientation program now that would never have been in that program 5 years ago. So I think it's education, but it's proactive education, and it certainly applies to just about any academic environment for doctoral students, for new faculty, et cetera.
Fantastic. All right, now it's your turn. Any questions that you have? We will take the wireless mic that we've been using and hand it off to the audience, and there's one more for all of you up here. Just as a favor, some of us in the room obviously will know who all of you are, but for our guests, if you could identify your name, the school you're part of here at RMU, and then go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, my name is Joe Young from School of Business. I have a question. Actually, it's not directly to Predatory Journal, but it's after I publish in the Elsevier Journal, I started to receive multiple emails every day from other publishers saying that they would like to publish a book and related to my research. So I typically ignore them until recently. I actually got an email from Elsevier, which is the publisher that they published the article. And actually, the journal itself has no problem. It's a well-recognized journal in my field. But the issue is, I don't know whether when you receive such an email from the publisher, so Elsevier, because normally we consider Elsevier as a good publisher, and so how should I treat them? Should I treat them as an opportunity? Because they request an interview and then talk about the possibility to develop a book. But I don't know whether I should just ignore them or should I respond?
I get those all the time too, from Elsevier, because I published one article back in 2011 or something that was 8 pages. They want a book all about it. Setting aside my lack of interest in doing a whole book on that topic, I treat it as, sort of they're letting me know that this is a thing that they do. And if I'm interested, maybe I could contact them. But the same thing that you do for journal article publishers, you should do for book publishers too. Because you should check out, like, if I write a book for you, what do I get? Right? Am I going to get royalties? Am I going to get any part of the sale? Am I going to sign over all my copyright to you so that you can sell it and then reap all the money off of my hard work? Books are a little bit different from journal articles, of course, but I would say, as with any publication that you do, just critically evaluate, even if it comes from a reputable publisher like Elsevier, if this is the best deal for you, if this is something you really want to do, and if it is something that will benefit you. Of course, if it comes from a reputable publisher, it already has that sort of backing behind it that okay, this is probably more legitimate than some random spam email I got about my dissertation that's openly available. But you should still always critically evaluate everybody, even those whose names you recognize.
In an effort to get as many questions in as possible, we'll have one of our panelists ask or answer a question again, so we can try to get as many questions from the audience as possible. So share the wealth up here.
Okay, hi, I'm Ben Campbell, Assistant Professor of Engineering here at RMU, and I have a two-part question for some of the non-RMU people, maybe to weigh in just a little bit each. We have A and B level journals here, and I was wondering, how your universities classify journals when you're going up for promotion, and secondly, also, who pays processing fees at your university for these journals?
You pay for them. We don't pay for. It depends. It depends on what college you are. If you are in our College of Education of Business, the College of Business pays for it. It goes from college to college, and it depends on the funds available. We're a state institution, so I guess that says it all.
We'll just very quickly let the two of you weigh in as well. Go ahead.
So to answer your first part about the A and B list, we as the information professionals are not here to dictate where faculty or students should be publishing, but to assist in evaluating the different venues that are given to us based on what you're looking at. So in many ways, what the department is doing is what many societies are doing as well. You know, beyond the journals or book series that they publish in their own right, they're also providing their own kind of white list of, here are acceptable journals that you could look at for a publication, journals that we will look at for promotion, tenure, or journals that the society recognizes as reputable journals in this particular discipline or subject. At CMU, we do have an article processing charge fund. We've set it up actually as an endowment where the interest is actually what we use every year for covering the fees, and we use an 80-20 split where the APC fund will cover 80% of any APC that's a valid request up to $1,500. And we do have on our website, we have a list of criteria about what is a reputable journal. So, you know, being a journal that would be listed in the DOAJ, a publisher that would be listed in what's called OASPA, or the Open Access Society for Publishing Association. And we also, because we also subscribe, one of the things that the libraries does is every time we go up for renegotiations with particular publishers and services is we try to negotiate APC discounts into those conversations. So many times it's you know, a 20% or 15% discount. There are publishers that will get a number of chits or passes for a number of articles to be covered based on our subscription levels. But also it's based on your involvement with the publisher. So especially with academic societies, if you have a membership, you may get a discount. Or if you have previously peer-reviewed one of their articles, you may get a discount. So we're trying to do as much as we can, but also the reason we do the 80-20 is to ensure that the academics understand that we're trying to do sustainable publishing, that there are these fees, the fees are valid in many cases, and it's about making sure that it's not just the libraries shelling out money for it, but making sure that it's a conversation between the libraries and the departments and the academics.
Lauren, anything you want to add to that as well before we go to the next question?
Microphone troubles. So first question, at Pitt, many departments have these white lists, like Dave mentioned, like acceptable journals, but we're also having a big conversation at the University of Pittsburgh about the Declaration on Research Assessment and the Leiden Manifesto, which are these declarations where departments and people who are reviewing folks for tenure and promotion promise to not evaluate their scholarly output in terms of impact factor or acceptable journals list, but on the value of the scholarship itself, taking into account both journal articles and other products such as data or books or digital humanities type projects and other things like that. So we're in the middle of this conversation. It's really exciting. So check those out if you're interested. As for the APCs, we also have an APC fund. We're one of the earliest signers of the Compact on Open Publishing Equity, or Compact on Publishing Equity. We, until very recently, funded everything out of our library collections budget, and we funded the whole APC for anybody who asked. And that worked out great when nobody knew about it. Last year, lots of people found out about it. We actually ran out of money by the third month of the year, so we had to make some changes, and we learned about what some other folks were doing, and now we have a program where authors can have up to a maximum amount per request and per year, and we're also looking at other sources of funding. So it's been really great, and we've met a lot of amazing authors at Pitt because of this program.
Great. We have time for probably one more, maybe two if they're quick. Greg, you're up first.
Hello, my name's Greg Crivey. First, thank you very much for sharing your valuable information with us and your knowledge this morning. For our articles, we're told to look under Cabell's peer-reviewed, If we follow that guideline, does that assure us that we will not come upon a predatory journal?
Bruce, let you go first.
Not necessarily. Cabal has multiple pronunciations depending upon where you're coming from, et cetera. It's a good resource. Unfortunately, it's more of an informational type resource, like giving you some background information on the journal title, who publishes it, how often it comes out, what the subscription fees are, things of that nature. Personally, as the reference librarian, I very rarely use Cabals. Sometimes it's a little bit out of date. Other librarians in our library do use it religiously. I'm more of a person that will go and look at the actual journal itself, and make my evaluations based on the statement of purpose, the scope of the journal, just stylistic things. Is it a journal that looks acceptable from a quote internet artistic point of view? Things of that nature, because there are so many other things out there, and every day we're getting more of them. If Beale's list comes back, that resource is back. The Directory of Open Access Journals, there's a lot of other information there. Bear in mind, sometimes publishers, journals may inflate, I'll use that word politely, some of their statistics, their journal impact factor, things of that nature. But it is a good resource. I'm not going to denigrate it or anything, but it's a good resource.
Let's get a question in the back, and then there is our last one will be an online question. Someone has sent us a chat question, but first in the back of the room there.
All right. My name is Abdurrahman Al-Zahrani. I'm here in the School of Engineering in RMU. I just want to ask, is it wrong to give my paper to many publishers just to make sure that my paper get published?
Louis, you want to tackle that one?
Yes, you should try one at a time, because first of all, if all of them say yes, they're going to find out that your paper is being published in another journal. So you should go one at a time, and if you get rejected, then you send it to the next one. Don't. My recommendation is don't do it.
I see all of you nodding, so I'll take that all of you agree on that one. The last question actually comes on from an online chat. Adam Sullivan, if you can read the question, please.
All right, so Dennis Crouch Jr. has a question about qualifying publishers and asks if there is not a process in place to verify publishers, what's the harm in establishing one?
You want the question asked one more time?
I can try to word it better. It's not written very well. Why not establish a verification process for submitting publications?
He's got you, huh?
All right, I'll try. So there are a lot of organizations and societies that verify publishers, like DOAJ, like the Open Access Scholarly Publishing Association, OASPA, that Dave mentioned earlier, and they have a very rigorous process for looking at publishers. As for submitting publications, a verification process for submitting your publication, I think we're all kind of working on that. So there are a lot of different ways to sort of verify author identity right now. For example, there's ORCID, where you can verify your identity as an author so you don't get confused with that other person who has a very similar name to you, or maybe you can not be confused with that guy with the same name who's on an editorial board that you don't know about. So there's a lot of ways to verify authorship, but as for verifying a like an actual just article, we're still working on that. So if you have any suggestions, I'm sure there may be some innovation.
Social?
I have one more comment.
Okay, yeah, very quick, and then we have to wrap up.
I guess I would also add, there's also, we talk about peer review, but there's also what we call post-peer review. So post-publication, using things like alternative metrics, alt metrics, using social media where the articles can be discussed. Many times journals now will add comment section where further discussion about the research can take place. So I think more journals are starting to offer that because authors want that information. They want to be able to have that.
I had a question, and I would also like to request one of my colleagues to share her experience. She recently went through an experience. So we might go a little bit over the time limit, but we should be fine. So what I hear from the panelists today is that research and research. The way I see it is that I'm researching my domain area, but before I publish it, I also need to research where I want to send it. Now, as you can see, research is already burdening on us, and we're spending hours and hours identifying something, writing a paper, and we'll also have to research where we want to publish. So my question to the panelists here is that, should there be an entity in a university where we can approach and say, I want to publish this, give me a journal where I can send it, instead of me doing the research? Now, I know all of you are from the library. Should the library be our point of contact? Or what are your thoughts? I was just wondering. So.
I'll comment on that.
Yeah. Start this way and come this way.
Being from the library, yeah, I kind of think this is beginning to evolve into a library assistance project. And in the RMU library, we just established in the last year and a half, a very formal liaison program. And I'm sure my colleagues have liaison programs as well. I started a liaison program when I first started here with the School of Nursing, because that's my area of expertise. And our authors in the School of Nursing do not hesitate to contact me for guidance on what journals we should, they may want to submit an article to. I'm envisioning, my boss might kill me, but I'm envisioning that we extend that through our liaison program. We have liaisons for the School of Engineering, School of Education, et cetera, into that being a service that is, if not just publicized, put it that way, that is available, that we do for our faculty and our students as well. I mean, our doctoral students in the 3 areas are very heavily involved in research, and probably of that group, they're probably the least cognizant of what's going on in the publication field. And maybe I'm thinking my neck out too far on this, but I would envision a much more formal liaison program where topics like this could be a faculty member or a doctoral student could pick up a phone and to say, hey, Bruce, I'm thinking about publishing this article, and sharing the article with the librarian, and then based upon that, making some suggestions. Because basically, I'm speaking for the School of Nursing, I know the literature in the School of Nursing inside out. And I can make a recommendation right off the top of my head. If it's an article on some kind of a pediatric journal article in pediatric nursing, I know what the pediatric nursing journals are and can make a recommendation or a set of recommendations. I'm not going to say publish in that article, but say you may want to look at A, B, C, and D. So yeah.
Lauren, does it have to come out of the library of a particular institution?
It doesn't have to, but librarians know a lot about this, and especially if you have a help you. But I want to temper that with I'm a scholarly communication librarian, so doing this kind of work is literally my job. And I help our subject specialists when they say, I found this new journal. I'm not really sure. It says it's open access. Is it predatory? Is it really good? I don't understand this copyright thing. So if you have a scholarly communication librarian, they are a great contact for this. If you don't have one, not to self-promote, but you should maybe consider getting one. But there are some other avenues out there. So there is an initiative that I recently read about, the Quality Open Access Measures, QOAM.eu, and they're evaluating journals. They're writing these reviews. They have like a scorecard, and anybody can submit one, but they have a board that kind of reviews them. So maybe that could also be a resource to add into the hands of this group or a person and say, here are a bunch of scorecards. How do I interpret this? Or, if people have already done these reviews for me, I can go and look at them and see but to say it's just starting. So they need some help getting these reviews from people who've actually published in some outlets or who know outlets. So check it out. And if you don't see your favorite journal on there, go ahead and leave a review card. But so there are some initiatives like this popping up.
Louis, David, anything to add to that?
Yes, it should be the responsibility of the library. We created a year ago a scholarly communication librarian, and that is part of one of her duties is to maintain that connection with the liaisons. And through the liaisons, things are filtered to her. The bigger the institution, the more scholarly communication librarians you're going to need, or eventually you're going to need a bigger panel or a bigger group of people that will act as a clearinghouse for faculty. And also they help with the research. When you start the research for your article, they help you with that, and then when it comes scholarly communications librarians are experts on copyright, so they will help you with that. You had something else?
No.
David, anything you want to add on to that?
No, my colleagues have said it very well. I do think, this is a way that the libraries can be entrenched within the research process and assist with this, in having both the scholarly communication librarian as well as the subject specialist liaison librarians. I mean, these are also librarians that are entrenched in the disciplines. Many cases they are disciplinarians themselves. At CMU we have one of my more recent colleagues holds a PhD in psychology. She is the psychology department's liaison for the libraries. And I think it's a way to interact with the libraries beyond just, this is the place I go to get the content I need, but having those experts there that can help make these interpretations and help the researchers with the process beyond even just finding a publication venue.
For the benefit of the audience here, I'd like to request my colleague, Dr. Jamila Al-Jaroudi, to share her recent experience in this area.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this panel. It's been very informative. Well, last year in 2016, I published a paper and presented it at one of the reputable IEEE conferences, and it's available on the IEEE Explorer. A few months later, I come across an article with the exact same title on Google Scholar, and I open that up, and I see my article with two different authors published in a journal. And I was amazed by what's going on, because basically what happened is the authors or the other people, they just took my article, removed our names as authors, put their names in, changed the sub-notes or something like that, and then sent it to a journal. Now that journal is based in India, and apparently it didn't go even through a review process because it just got published and available online. Thankfully, I involved the librarians here at RMU, and we were able to contact the journal. They pulled it out. They apologized, said something went wrong, or something like that. But this is something like an eye-opener. You need to look at everything you've published earlier and see if anybody just got it and put it in one of those predatory journals.
Are any of you familiar with any story similar to that as we wrap up? Lauren, I'll give you the last word then as you were nodding your head.
Oh my goodness. So this happens with alarming frequency, and not just for predatory journals, but for reputable journals and books everywhere. Plagiarism is a problem, and sometimes it is malicious. Sometimes it's just out of not knowing what the rules are. But you can see so many examples of this on outlets like Retraction Watch and other blogs that follow this kind of thing. It is a problem, and I think authors need to be aware of the fact that plagiarism is a thing that can happen. It's something we should pay attention to. We should check our own work to make sure that we know what the rules are and we're doing everything the right way, and teach our students how to think about this and how to do this as well. We had an instance in one of the journals that we published at University of Pittsburgh recently, where an author had lifted several passages from another author's article to put into their article, like wholesale, without actually quoting or attributing those quotes to that person. Our journal had to issue a retraction of that. It was a big process, but there are processes in place at reputable journals for this, for doing retractions, for doing errata, for making sure that they set the record straight. So it's always important to pay attention to those things too. If you read a journal, to go and read, oh, there's a retraction of this article, what happened? And to familiarize yourself with the process there, because there are processes in place to correct these problems when they happen. And with reputable traditional publications, these processes have been used for decades. So I'm sorry that happened to you. That's a horrible thing, but I'm glad that you were able to get the paper pulled down and have a resolution.
Very quickly, yeah, just very, very quickly, because we have to.
And all that, but the unfortunate part is you don't really sometimes see this until after the fact. Once it's published somewhere, anywhere, even in a legitimate journal, it still happens after the fact. And while retractions are nice, people don't always see them because they might not show up until 4 or 5 issues later, et cetera. So it's an unfortunate, I don't want to say fact of life, but yeah, plagiarism is not a pleasant thing, put it that way.
David, very quickly, as the last word.
So how did you find this other illegitimate article? I think what you're alluding to here is very important, that with researchers, what I would call research communication, of keeping track of things that you've published, and creating a Google Scholar account with your articles to say when something like that pops up. So that's great. At least you caught it.
All right. My thanks to, for my closest to me, to furthest down the line, David Scherer from Carnegie Mellon University, Luis Gonzalez from IUP, Lauren Collister from Pitt, and Bruce Johnston from RMU. A round of applause for what was a fascinating conversation this morning. A quick reminder on our schedule before we wrap up. We have a very short break till about 10:15. There is still some coffee and cold beverages in the back, meaning orange juice, water, and iced tea. Don't get any ideas. And then beginning at about 10:15, our poster session will begin next door in the International Suite. And be sure to come back here right about noon for lunch and a keynote address. And I am going to hopefully pronounce the name correctly. If I don't, my apologies in advance to Rasu Shrestha. Am I close enough, at least, to at least be to at least do a credible job? Who is the Chief Innovation Officer at UPMC? That will be the keynote address in this room at noon. So with that, we wrap up. One more round of applause for our panelists, please.